Hello, welcome everyone to the Empowered Woman podcast, where we're celebrating courageous women who turn struggles into success. And I am your host, Nicole Ananda. And for the last 20 years, I've been a certified life coach and healing arts professional. And I've supported women to live a life of passion, power, and purpose so that they can experience more love, joy, and success. So if you're ready to ignite your life and you want to hear about these amazing women, then subscribe to The Empowered Woman and become a part of our community, where excuses hold no power, resilience reigns, transformation happens, authentic power is created, and wise women lift each other up higher and higher. Today's guest is my dear friend, Jen Trumm, and she has over 20 years in HR leadership and a certification as a life and mindset coach. Jen can say without hesitation that the last couple of years have been the bumpiest of her life. Woohoo! Yeah, that sounds like all of us.
You're so funny.
Now, working for almost a year at the Ashland Co-op as the HR manager and co-host of a podcast designed for women in the field of human resources called Thrive and Shine HR. I love that name. Jen has begun to find the purpose of her life, and it has everything to do with serving others. With big dreams, but not necessarily all the answers on how she's getting there, Jen takes an intentional approach to both her life and the relationships she creates and cultivates, aligning her bigger vision with a life she never knew was possible for herself. How exciting. What she's realized these last couple of years is that by making a couple of shifts in her day to day life, adding meditation, thought work, and emotional awareness and regulation, she's been able to dramatically alter the way she shows up in her life and with others. Her relationships have become exponentially richer, and life overall has become fuller than she ever knew she was worthy to receive. With a goal of bringing more mental health resources to women in human resources, Jen's podcast and other work is a driving force that will no doubt fuel Jen's passions for many years to come. Wow, that is an awesome bio. I just want to say it's just very full and rich, and it explains so much of what you're going through and what people can really wrap their heads around and resonate with. So thank you so much for coming, Jen. I'm so excited to have you here. So, as the
You.
title of this podcast, we want to hear from you. What were some of the struggles that you've endured in your life that you want to share with us that have led you to all of this like beauty and magic that you're now sharing with other women? And I'll just let you riff and then we'll have a great conversation.
Right on. Well, first, I want to thank you so much for having me and for everything that you put out into the world. I've had an opportunity to come and do your breath work, which is amazing. I've had an opportunity to kind of be a part of things that you put out there. I'm just so grateful for you in so many ways. And yeah, that intro was so it was so
Good to
funny.
hear
It's
it.
been a while since I've been on a podcast and I'm like, what was I thinking? That's so long. But it's like, it's just I'm so excited to kind of be where I'm at and be able to share with you. So my real journey started about 4 years ago. And it's funny, the more and more people that we talk to, it's like COVID, there were so many things that happened in 2020 that just popped so many of us open. And I was working at Dutch Bros Coffee at the time as an HR director. And actually this was when they were starting to blow up, hadn't gone public yet. And I just felt something was off. I look around me, COVID was really full steam at that time. It was like summer of 2020. And I just saw suffering all around me. Here I was, Dutch Bros, if you know Dutch Bros, you know Dutch Bros. And it was still the same thing. And so at that time, we were now, not commuting to work. And so I had some time and I'm like, I'm going to get certified as a lay. I want to really help people. I feel like this higher calling within me to be able to serve at a different level, and I think so often in HR, it's transactional and it's, so many things that I have been feeling this like turn within me for several years before that. And it was really 2020 that kind of went and something happened and I went and got certified. And then after getting certified, I was still at Dutch Bros, but yet it was still not done, right? There was like more that I felt like I really wanted to put out into the world. And so I left Dutch Bros and started doing full coaching full time. But when I did that initially, I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't have a niche, I didn't have a direction, I didn't have focus, none of that. I was just like, I'm out here.
I
I
love
was,
that.
oh my gosh, I loved it too. And what it did for me, I mean, what it did for me, right? For those of us who really know the inner work, is what it did for me is it put me out in the wild and said, figure it out, right? Figure it out. And so there I was out of my, full-time career after 20 years in HR and like just couldn't, I was all over the place. And it wasn't until about 6, 7 months out of my role of Dutch Bros. And so now we're into 2021, almost into 2022, because I left Dutch Bros actually fall of 2021. So it took me some time to get my certification, get my grounding, and saying, okay, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And then doing it. And then 6, 7 months later, I was hitting walls, right? Because I hadn't quite really figured myself out yet. And so it wasn't until I started really start defining my niche around women in HR that I saw me and that I saw that I was helping me and I was serving me. Even though when I first left HR, I'm not gonna lie, I wanted to get as far away from HR as possible, right? Like so many people in different fields, you're in it long enough and that it's almost turns you dark, right? Like and I think in HR, that's what happens. You're in it long enough and deep enough, it can turn you a little dark. And so it took me some time to kind of unravel from that and really start to kind of come out of my own shell and recognize I am here to serve me in, all the different, shapes and sizes of me. And when that happens simultaneously, though, it was almost like, what was the word I would call it to describe? But it was like something broke open inside of me when I finally really kind of figured out my purpose. And in doing so, it really freaked out people around me, right? Like
Explain.
really freaked out people around me. And because I started, kind of showing up as this person I didn't even realize was within me, right? To be able to kind of have this new awareness that I'm here, like, yeah, everything kind of shook up. And when that happened, people close to me didn't know what to make of it. And it was
Sure.
scary and it was different and it was too much and it was overwhelming. And so I had people in the medical community and my family who really legitimately thought I had gone crazy.
Oh my
And
goodness. Yeah.
that was enough to turn everything upside down in my life for quite a long period of time. So this was in summer 2022 when that happened. And I didn't know right from wrong, up and down, right? Like everything got confusing. It was a big, big mess for quite a while. But it was what many of us who now kind of know the inner work call the dark night of the soul, right? Like I was forced into it. I didn't have a choice. Didn't
Right.
expect it, wasn't planning it, but boy, did it like cause me to have to do some stuff,
Oh
within
my goodness.
myself
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
accepting of opinions of people who were very close to me, who now saw me as problem, that saw me as ill. And so there was a lot of push from people in my family who were in the medical community to get medicated, to get treatment.
Wow, this is shocking. I mean, it's not shocking and it's shocking because you're like
Yeah.
literally my ideal client. Like I work with women, right, who are going through like major life transitions and
Yeah.
reinventing themselves, but
Yeah.
often in that process, yeah, the whole world changes, sheds, your identity shifting. The people around you don't want to accept that because they're used to you as you. And
Yeah. Start putting
they
up those boundaries.
yeah, their ego gets shuffled because
Yeah.
your ego is shedding and your identity is shedding. And there's so much that comes up in that process. And especially with, I would say, spiritual awakenings, right? People go through these spiritual awakenings that just look like it's a lot of change all at once.
Yeah.
And so, how do they deal with that? Because people like you would feel alone because other people don't understand what's happening.
Right.
So it's so interesting that you're saying. So continue with your story. I'm just going, wow, yeah, this is really fascinating that they would want to like almost like commit her, because she's coming into her purpose, God forbid.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, because well, what really kind of triggered it is like I said, I was kind of, pushing through some serious stuff as I was really starting to figure things out. And at the same time, I was running out of money, right?
Mm,
So anyone who's now in entrepreneurship or has ever been in entrepreneurship know exactly what I'm talking about. Like you you have a finite, there's a finite amount of space that we have to be able to kind of pursue what we want love to pursue. And so there was like these time crunches that were kind of coming to me that I think really caused me to propel in a
mm,
way during that time. So again, this was like spring of 22, and it was early summer of 22 that I went on this 7-day vacation with my family. Many of them I hadn't seen in quite some time.
uh-huh.
And so that's how it happened, right? Like it's like the perfect storm that you could never really anticipate coming into an environment where I haven't seen family members who have expectations of me, have perceptions of me, and about 14 of us, right, with a big chunk of them by the end of it, pretty convinced there was something really wrong with me. And I laugh now. It's not funny. It's not funny at all. But that's kind of the reality of like how, when we do change ourselves, when we do make this commitment to ourselves, how that perception can really impact other people. And to see that happen with so many simultaneously was like, I don't know, I'm still looking for the movie rights on this.
Oh my God. Well, I have to tell you a really funny story that kind of to insert about family really quick.
Yeah.
Is my mom passed away 2 months ago, two and a
Oh,
half months ago, which
yeah,
I,
I'm so
so I
sorry.
can say this with a smile because I feel so much of her. But like, this is the funny story about my mom is my mom to the day that she died still said to me, Nicole, when are you going to get a job? And I was like, I don't understand why you keep saying you said this. I've had my own business since 2009.
Oh my God.
2009. And still, it's like that old mindset, She grew
Yes,
up with the punch
yes.
clocks and the whole thing. So she never understood that I
Yeah.
was an entrepreneur with my own business. Like she could not wrap her head around it.
And
So
I
I
almost want to
get
say in the
it.
most, yeah, and I
I
almost
get
want to say
it.
in the most loving of way, bless her heart.
I know. Yeah,
Bless
right?
her heart.
That's my heart. Yeah, I'm like, okay. Yeah, I just had to, at some point, I just had to go, okay.
Yeah, I
Like
know.
there are people that will understand you and there's people
Yeah,
that just won't.
it
It's
just
just their
never
belief system.
will.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a whole nother podcast,
It's a whole other
right? Because that is exactly, as much as, from 2009 to today, it's going to be what it's going to be. And we just got to continue to be who we are. And that's where I am 2 years later.
wow. I
Like,
mean, congratulations, that's what I'd like to say to
yeah,
you.
thank you. It was something that shook me to my core and caused me to have to reevaluate who I am, why I am.
Yeah.
Like all of it I think had to reevaluate because I had to really start to like get crystal clear about some very close relationships in my life as well. And so it's yeah, that's one of the things that I hadn't, had no idea when they say spiritual awakening, man.
Yeah, it's no easy thing. And
No, they
yeah,
kind of leave out that middle piece that's really, really isolating and scary and
yeah.
all the things. But anyway, so what ended up happening after that is I went through and got myself diagnosed or not diagnosed and went through processes just to like really make sure that I was clear.
Uh-huh.
Because that's the thing. It's like, that it's something like that can get you to question yourself if you're not too careful. And so through all of that, I ended up getting to the point where I could not keep up on the coaching. It was impossible. Like, how do you possibly show up, and coach others when I'm like, who the heck am I?
Right, right, right. Yeah, you
Right.
just gotta
So,
get
but
clear.
I
Yeah.
ended up taking a break, going back to work for a little bit. I ended up getting a job at a hotel group here in Southern Oregon where we live.
Uh-huh.
And that didn't work out. I ended up getting let go, which is a whole nother thing. I did a podcast on that, but ended up getting let go. It wasn't the right fit for me.
Mhm.
And within about a week and a half, somebody at the co-op reached out to me
Uh-huh.
and it was serendipitous. Since then, it's been serendipitous. It's been a match made in heaven. It's a small little community grocery store in small rural Oregon. And it was the perfect calling for me because they're going through just the right amount of change that I'm like the perfect Lego to fit. Like,
Um,
like it's pretty amazing. And
that's fantastic.
so, and what I have to say about it is because my true passion is helping to serve other women in HR, the coming back to HR after going through this dark night of the soul kind of thing has
Uh-huh.
actually been one of the greatest gifts I could have ever never anticipated.
Yes.
Right? Like
Yeah.
never could have anticipated. And yet, like it's been perfectly planned all along. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
The divine unfoldment.
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
so resonate with your story. It's like I went through that when I was leaving corporate America.
Oh
This
gosh.
was a long time ago. And same thing, like I was on a path coming from Georgetown University and getting jobs in advertising and marketing. And there was a woman, I tell this story sometimes, there was a woman one day who stood up in a meeting, and she was part of what's called trafficking in advertising is are the people that bring things from, let's say, the creative types to the account managers, and they're the ones that get sign off on the whole process of production on, let's say, an ad or TV program or whatever.
Mhm.
So she was in traffic, and she stood up one day. We were all arguing about the color of a logo and the position on a page for hours, literally. I'm not even kidding. It was just like, really. So she
Yeah.
stood up and she said, Jesus, we are not saving lives here. Like, and it was like everybody just like looked at her and she just had it, you know? She was like, I'm done. And she just like slammed the paper down and she quit. And I remember like still all the hairs on my arms stand up because I was like, she is right. And it was that moment that was like a pivot. I wish I could remember her name and I could tell her this story again because it was so pivotal in my transition. Like
Yeah.
where I looked at her and I knew I wanted to serve people as well, but I had never been exposed to anything really other than the path that my parents had
Yeah.
outlined for me,
Exactly.
essentially.
Me too.
And I went, wow. And so not it wasn't that much longer, probably another year, year and a half, something like that, where I just said, I'm done. I'm gonna go on kind of like a vision quest in a way. And my way of doing that was like, let's just get every single class that I've ever wanted to take in adult education, like at any like any place in San Francisco I was living at the time. And I took art classes, graphic design classes, acting classes. I ended up doing all these things, but it was so chaotic, similar to what you said.
Yeah.
People were like, what is she doing? She made money. She was on a career path and she just left everything. Now she's like
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
actress, like I was just like
All
doing
over the
random
place.
stuff all over the place because I needed that breadth of
Yes, you did.
experience or just open my perception to other things that were creative. And I was a creative type always, which is how I got into advertising. I was like this shadow creative that was like trying to be creative but didn't know how to be.
Yeah.
And then I went on, it was a long, windy road that led to yoga eventually, and that became my path. But it was several years of that. And same thing. My parents were like, what is wrong with her? My friends were like, what is she doing? Now she's like on the street handing out gum as a promotional thing. Like, where is she go? I was just like, oh, I'm just gonna do whatever I want. But then yeah, money started running out and I had to take some jobs. But it all led me to taking jobs within the health and wellness industry, which is the industry I've been in for 20 years. So it was kind of like my soul was guiding me towards yoga and wellness and health and healing and transformation. But I had no idea. I mean, I never would have guessed I'd be doing what I'm doing now. I had no idea how it was going to unfold. And there was a lot of resistance, a lot of dark night of the soul moments also. My dad died in 2001. That was a big catalyst for my spiritual awakening, which led me on that whole path. So there's these, and what I've noticed, Jen, also over time, is that my life has unfolded in these patterns of 7 years, where every 7 years, and I've heard this from other people where they say
I
10
have
years, but
too. Yeah.
there's these patterns where we kind of hit these big awakening moments and something shifts and we evolve. And I liken it to like learning a sport. Sometimes I'm like, it's like snowboarding. Like you learn, you go down, you learn how to turn, you're going for a while, and then you meet like a jump, and all of a sudden now you're jumping, and then you're like, oh, okay. And so it's like we keep hitting these like moments where we have
Mhm.
these big openings, and
Yeah.
we can go in any direction. It's really our free will,
Yeah.
but it's kind of part of the journey, right? It's like these hero journeys, heroine journeys throughout our lives that we can tap into.
Yeah.
And if we let go enough, let like God steer the ship. There's
Hmm.
so much excitement that and like amazing synchronicities, like you were just saying about the Ashland Co-op,
Yeah.
that will come into our frame if we're available to see it, you
Yeah.
know? And then
Yeah.
if we have guidance and support and help, like people like you and me and people out there that are like, I'll hold your hand during that process, then people can really expand, like really grow, you know? It's kind of
Yeah.
exciting. What?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a really amazing quote by Jay Shetty where he talks about the best thing that he's ever been told in terms of advice is always open every door that's ever offered to you. Something like that around like whenever these opportunities present themselves to us, I think what we naturally do is we kind of coil, right? Like that's kind
Mm.
of the natural and inclination for so many. And I think part of this journey is actually then to move forward, right? To actually go
Mm.
in as we see the opportunities and the doors open. And, that has been, I think, for you and your story and mine and mine, it has been the only way. It's, the only way is to, be aware. And then when we do see that opportunity to walk through.
Jump on it. Oh, I
Yeah.
love that. Yeah, that's so powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah. My favorite phrase still is leaning in. I've
I
been
love
using
that
that ever since
too.
the book came out. Lean in. I was
Yeah.
just like, ooh, what's that mean? Like, let me do that.
Yeah.
So it's very similar to what I think Jay Shetty is saying. That's a
Mhm.
really good one.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about this podcast idea and like other things that you're working on to support women. And I love that you said that you're working with the past version of you. That's such a coaching term in business. Like,
Yeah.
who's the past version of yourself that you're teaching? Because it is true. You're on the other side of that, let's say, wild ride and dark night of the soul. And now you can walk women to the other side and say, I can hold your hand. I know the tools and all the things to get you somewhere. Are you guiding women in HR to be better HR women, or are you guiding women in HR to leave HR and create their own businesses, or is it a little bit of both? It's probably both. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be whatever it
Yeah,
is most, that's most calling to in each individual
yeah,
person.
yeah.
And, really, I think what it is Thrive and Shine HR, that the podcast that I've created with a really good friend of mine is we're both life coaches and we've both been in the HR field. She now does coaching full time and, also does, a lot of consulting. And then I'm working full time in HR, but yet I have the passion. And so every week we come on and we talk about mental health related things that impact women in HR. So it's different. It's different than other podcasts. It's different than other things that we've seen out there. And it's really not about, you're not coming to us to talk about policies and laws and, oh no, what's happening with paid leave Oregon. That's not us. We're here to talk about like how stress truly impacts us and how we can really set the right, you know, put the right steps in place so we can start being more intentional. And, these are the things we need. And for us to be able to show up as our best selves in our lives, whether it's as an HR professional, as a mom, as a partner, as a community member, right? These are tools we need. And I think the HR profession is like, I'll get on a soapbox, but it's like we have such an amazing opportunity in the role of HR, but we get bogged down.
Mm,
Anyone in HR knows that we get bogged down with the policies and the handbooks and the SOPs and the procedure manuals, and it's so wild. And so for us to really be able to like fulfill any type of purpose we would want to have in HR, if HR is our purpose, right? Like you were talking about, is it like
mhm.
leaving? It may be, right? But it's also being able to kind of accept the reality of what is and also being intentional about where we can make an impact, right? And first and foremost, that begins within ourselves. And so all of the doubts and all the insecurities and not feeling enough and imposter syndrome, and I'll go on and on and on. But
Yeah.
all of that is like what we have to like bring to the surface, and we have to be able to call it for what it is so we can actually start to like help us see a better way. And that's the podcast each week. And it's just been a dream come true. We're on episode 16. So it's
Oh, right.
really new. We just started in January. And, something that, after one of the things, I'm going to back up a little bit just because one of the things I want to clarify around everything that had happened with my family and feeling like something was really wrong with me. One of the things that was really fascinating about that whole thing is that it was really because during that week vacation, I was too gregarious, right? So for them during that period of time, it was really about sensing that I was having what you would call like a manic episode. That's how I appeared to many family who'd never seen, hadn't seen me in a lot of times. So anyway, I
Yeah.
want to clarify that just in case there's any confusion on that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, so the podcast, one of the things that, once I kind of got to a place within myself that I healed from a lot of, everything that had happened, that was really where I wanted to start. I was like, okay, I'm now working back in HR full time again. It's going to take me some time. I mean, I ain't gonna lie, I built up a little debt, not only before, what I call what happened, with my family and all that, my accident, but, it was debt that I was hoping so much that I could make it work and, pushing through so much darkness and trying to make it happen. So now I'm in a position where this role that I'm in now is, like I said, it's like a Lego because I can hang out here and I can also do something like a podcast to help be able to put out into the world what I know is needed. And so that's kind of the balance I'm finding today. And
Mhm.
then in the future, what that looks like, if it ends up being coaching again, if it ends up being public speaking, I'd love to get on like national HR stages out there. They don't have people like me
I love
on
that.
those HR stages. I can tell you that right now because they're all out there. I've been to, hundreds of HR conferences. Actually, I have been to so many HR conferences. And yeah, it's so much about, the laws and the policies and how to deal with conflict and all of these things. And I think we need more of how to help serve ourselves. And that's my
Yeah.
purpose,
Gosh. I
that's my
mean,
goal. Yep.
yeah, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt if you
No, I'm so sorry too. But that's what I know my purpose to be. So I'm gonna find my ways to kind of figure out how to do that within kind of the confines of my new reality today.
Yeah, I mean it's so rich what you're doing, and I'm curious because I haven't been in the corporate world in quite some time, and I imagine always that HR women are coming into HR because they do want to serve people, which
Yeah.
is interesting,
Yeah.
and it's interesting that in order to serve people, I may have had to leave HR to find other avenues to serve people, and I think it's what you're saying is probably really apropos, which is like they struggle with all the actual details and these handbooks and these policies. And it may not be as much direct contact or creative or as creative as maybe some want to be. And I'm kind of curious about that. So, as the workforces have changed and society has changed with it, in terms of we know now there's probably more presentations around stress, there's probably more talk about internal systems within corporate America for health. How has, like, what are some of the trends that you see? And I'd love to hear more about that because I find that to be really interesting. How are we serving people through HR now, and what else needs to change?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Such good questions.
I'm like, that's
Such
a whole
good.
nother podcast.
No, I can be concise, but there's
Yeah.
such good questions because everything is changing right now. And I think 2020 was a catalyst to that too. In the whole realm of business environments and organizational structures and who we are and who we serve and all of that. But one of the things, within the HR field, you are so right that like many of us get into the field because we want to serve. We want to help. The idea is like, I want to get into this field because I see it's about people, right? It's a people job. And then the reality gets like a sucker punch, right? And the sucker punch is the policies and laws and all of that. But the other sucker punch that happens over and over and over again that I've seen now through coaching is through the leadership, right? It always starts at the top, right? So the owners, shareholders, stakeholders, all of that is going to matter when it comes to whether or not you're supported, whether or not you're believed, whether or not they see value in what you can do, or whether or not they're just kind of pushing you to the side. All those things matter, right? And so often I think people in HR, they kind of get into these roles and they like it because it's a good pay, right? They give good benefits. You know, and all of that stuff at the deep level, it don't matter.
Uh,
Like it really doesn't matter at the deepest level. And yet then we become unsatisfied. And all of these things spin out because we're not valued in the way that we know we are here to serve.
mhm.
And so that's the thing that I think has been so interesting coming back into the field and really working with people in HR to be able to see it for what it is, that a lot of times, sometimes it's a misalignment between what you know you can do and what
Mhm.
the leadership at a level you have no control over is telling you you have to do. And if that is out of alignment, honey, that's not going to change.
Yeah, right.
That's not going to change. And so helping people to kind of come to terms and accept that reality and then say, now what? Right. And it
Mm.
doesn't have to be outside of HR because I can tell you right now, I'm in a role that sees the value of HR. And that is something that is not as rare as it used to be, but Nicole, it was rare 15 years ago. Me going, finally going to a place like Dutch Bros before I got into coaching was a dream come true for anyone who knows that organization because you do not see that. I've worked many places in my career. I think I counted 25 different places since I first started at Taco
Wow.
Bell at age 16.
Mhm.
So I've been around the block. I kind of know, what it is. And I do know at the deepest level, it's always going to come down to our internal, what's right and what's not right for us and what aligns and what doesn't align and being honest with ourselves about that. So
Yeah,
I kind of
that's
go at a tangent. I'm sorry, but it's like
no,
I
that's
love
it's
HR
so
so
powerful.
much and I love the potential that we have. And yet so many of us are kind of locked into this hamster wheel of thinking that, they're not in control. And
It makes so much sense to me. I've only had one client in the last 10 plus years as a life coach that was actually an HR person. And we always had this discussion because I said, she was so busy and because she wanted to help people, actually there's two people. Actually, I had two HR people for different companies and both of those women, that's funny because I see the parallels now.
yeah,
Both of those women had their phone on 24/7.
yeah,
They had open door policy, so anyone could walk into their office at any time if they needed anything. These were part of the boundaries that we had to create as a life coach because they
right
were also
on.
taking their work home with them. They were working super late hours, and I was like, "When do you ever turn off, like with
Yeah,
your job?" And it was affecting their relationships, and they had all these issues with their kids, like all the family systems at home were having a problem. And I was like, well, yeah, like you're available 24/7. You're not a ER doctor, but you've created an experience where basically you could be paged at any moment to help someone. And as beautiful as that is, it's boundaryless and it's going to affect your life and your own self-care. And both of them had no self-care and were super
yeah,
stressed, like you're saying. And so I do find that interesting, like really interesting. And so they both work, well, one of them worked for a big, I don't know if I can name companies, but a very big healthcare company.
mm,
And she had no self-care
mm,
for herself. So isn't
yeah.
that ironic, right? So it's like, so
It
when you
is, and I see
say,
it all the time. Like
yeah,
that's not unusual. And it's, it's so fascinating. It's
yeah. So when you're talking about like real-time tools and things, can you give maybe us an example of some of the resources you might offer? And like, I know you were talking about doing, in addition to the podcast, kind of a resources live cast. What types of things might you start with when it comes to a human resources person, and how would you help them? Maybe just some
Yeah.
practical.
Yeah. I think, both Catherine, my co-host for the podcast, and I are so committed to the cause of helping women in HR that she has a ton of resources that, because she's been doing it for years before I was. So she has on Tuesdays, she has something called HR Empower Hour and, all of these things that, we offer to the people who come, to our site. We have a Facebook group that now has about 17,000 people in it. So it's,
Wow. Wow,
yeah.
it's
So we're
17,000. That's a ton of people.
17,000 women in human resources. So it's
Incredible.
pretty amazing. Yeah.
Is it like 90% feminine, like the HR department heads, or
Yeah.
what is it? Yeah.
It's women. Yeah, a
It's
lot
mostly
of them
women,
are
huh?
in senior roles, but many other roles as well. People just getting into HR, people who are consultants, a lot of times it's people who just don't have a lot of support and resources. And so it's called Women of HR Support Group. And that's
Wow.
on Facebook. And so, yeah, that's what we're doing. I do a Tuesday thing that I just started a couple weeks ago called the Thoughtful Tuesday Turnaround. And so I take whatever topic we had on the podcast the day before, which this week was stress, and then I break it down even further. And I gave 10 things this week. What are 10 things? And obviously take what you need, take what feels right, but 10 things that you can do today that can really help with stress. So it was around self-care, mindfulness, meditation, really being able to kind of coach ourselves. There were several really good things. And that's on my Facebook page, LinkedIn, all those places you can find that.
Yeah, I definitely want to have the links to that in the
Awesome.
show notes so that people can connect with you. That's such a valuable resource. And what I also want to say is it's so clear. So for women, you kind of touched upon this in the beginning, and I as coaches, you and I as coaches, it's so important to get really clear on who you're
Mhm.
serving and your message. It couldn't be
Yeah,
more clear, right? Like women of HR support, like,
right.
and that's how people find the support that they need, especially when there's so much out there today. And now, so like the coaching industry obviously is booming, but it's hard for people because they're like, where do I go? So the
Yeah,
clearer you are, that's very clear, then, that's how these things grow and people
yeah.
get the right tools for exactly the job that they're in or the role that they're in. So that's really great.
Yeah, yeah. And then just keeping it going from there. I'm still kind of in the process of rebuilding, as wild as that sounds, but something like this really kind of took some time for me to kind of figure myself out. And so that's where it's exciting. It's like I don't know what's next. I know that I'm really happy where I'm at in my role at the co-op. I think I'm really happy with this podcast. And then who knows? I'll wait for that next door to open.
Yeah, and that is like the feminine business
Yeah,
way,
yeah,
right? Also
yeah.
is to have the clear message, but also to allow spirit to guide us, and it's not a woo-woo thing. Like if people really understood kind of some of the principles of manifestation,
Mhm.
it's really about intending, but also having an element of really surrender and letting
Yeah,
go and
yeah.
not having too many expectations because we can never conceive how amazing life will show up for us. So, as we had a little break there, a little interrupted break
Cool.
from the
Techie break.
internet, what would you like us to know? Let's say if we were the women in HR, your avatar, your ideal client, what would you want us to know? And how can we connect with you? Yeah, just kind of as we wrap up today.
Yeah, I mean, I would go way beyond women in HR just because I know, your audience is women and my message is to anyone out there is to listen to listen to ourselves, to really pay attention to the voice and really start to recognize that sometimes, it's not going to stop. When there's something calling for us, it's going to continue to find a way no matter our circumstances. And so the more that we resist, the more it will persist. And so I just really want to make that a call to action for everyone out there to take that one step today that's a little bit more towards our authentic selves. And each day we can be more prideful about how we walk in this world because it's aligned with who we really are. So, how to connect with me, Thrive and Shine HR, you can find it on all the podcast different platforms. And in terms of reaching out to me, if you wanted to connect at all and hear more about what I have going on, you can go to my website at jentrumm.com.
Perfect. How simple. Thank you
I
so
know.
much.
I like to
And
make things simple.
yeah, we'll have everything down in the show notes as well. And we'll have just a lot of fun, conversations probably too in the future. And I just love your message and what you have to say. And congratulations on turning your life into such a success, meaning you went through a massive spiritual awakening and here you are leading and helping women. And that's so courageous. And so it's exactly the women like you that I hope will always inspire other women definitely to get closer to their authentic selves and feel courageous and empowered. So thank you so much, Jen, for
Oh,
coming on
thank
and
you.
imparting your great wisdom and your heart and your clarity. And yeah, we'll have hopefully a nice big hug. We both live in Ashland, so we can hug each other at the co-op and yeah, continue to blossom our relationship. So thank you so much for coming on here today. And as we close, I'd just like to ask everyone if you are interested in hearing other stories and like amazing stories, really like Jen's, then please check out the links below and subscribe to this channel to hear from other courageous women who are turning their struggles into success. It's our pleasure to be with you today. Thank you so much and have a beautiful day.